But I'm a board certified neurotherapist, a licensed psychologist, and a coach, and I practice in Chicago, Illinois. And I'm also the owner of Optimal Neural Holistic Services, the founder of Dr. J's Holistic Health and Wellness. It's a nonprofit. I am the host of Your Holistic Way with Dr. J, a podcast, and I will soon be an author of the book, The Couch Experience: How to find a good therapist, or a guide to good therapy. So those are just some of the things that I do. I've been in therapy for over 10 years, and this has been my life's calling and my passion. I love what I do when in my work with people face to face, but I do speaking engagements like this so that I can reach more people. I can spread the message of the importance of mental health, and so that I can help to break down the stigma that is around mental health. And so whatever you gain here, please don't hold it to yourself. Share with other people and talk about it so that we can chip away at this thing that keeps us from getting the assistance that we need. And mental health will not change, or the views on mental health will not change until we are able to talk about it, just like we would any other conversation. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. It's one of the major topics that I talk about, at all kinds of organizations. And growing up Black and in the Black church, I saw firsthand how taboo the topic of mental health was, and how some people and some families, they were really conflicted in their role with God, and then in their role with how to manage like God and then their earthly needs, right? And so the view was largely negative. Now, I do think some of that is changing a little bit now, but we still have a long way to go, like a long way. So we're gonna slide. We can actually slide twice with the slides. I'm not sure if Reverend Womack is still with us. I can't see her or the slides, and I'm hoping you guys can still see the slides. But I am on slide number 3, if you're still there. So before, we can talk about what to do, we have to talk about kind of like what is holding us back. So one of the major things that's holding us back is the perpetuating beliefs. Rethinking the church means that we have to change our faulty thinking. And we have to change those faulty beliefs. I think we're holding on to like beliefs from our ancestors, and we're way up in 2020. And so we need to change those. Some of those beliefs or some of those things that kind of hold us back and different beliefs and different things is stigma. So a lot of people feel like if they have a mental condition, they don't want people to know, they don't want anybody to find out, because people will look at them funny. So there's a lot of stigma around mental health and mental illness. And then seeking assistance. So seeking assistance, from the church or from your pastor. It's great to go to your pastor or your spiritual leader for help. But they're only equipped to do so much, right? And so if something is more chronic or if it's more acute, that is when a mental health professional is needed. Plus, we don't want to overtax our clergy, our pastors, who need to be able to provide for the whole church. And then there's a lack of understanding of resources. So it's funny how I work in a more predominantly white neighborhood, and how many resources are available. But when I go to neighborhoods of color, especially ones with people who look like me, they've never heard of a lot of the different things that I do or the services that I provide. That's another reason why I like to talk at different things like this and in neighborhoods who normally don't know what is available to them. Everything, medication is helpful, but there's so many other resources other than medication that people don't know about. And so I try to spread the word about what's out there. And so when you know what resources are out there, sometimes then you will pick somebody else to help you with it. Prayer, and don't beat me up with prayer, because prayer is good. Prayer works. I remember a time when I was at my lowest in my career. Prayer helped me. God helped me. Leaning on the Lord helped me. But those statements like prayer, praying away things, sometimes those things are damaging and they hinder us from getting the access to care that we need. Leaning on your family and friends can be a hindrance. Sometimes we wear our family and friends out. They are not our therapists. And sometimes if you are sharing certain things, somebody might spread your business, or you might get somebody who is giving you advice that really serves them and helps them. So they're not there really to help you. There's also all kinds of unique assumptions about mental health, like that it's more liberal or it's more secular, and that if you go see a therapist, you feel like that therapist will be forcing you into those kind of ideas. But that is not fully true. You can find a therapist with similar beliefs and who will help to foster what you want. And that is the ultimate goal of therapy, that the therapist helps to foster what you want in your sessions and what goals you want to work on. And then there's this whole notion of rejecting God. So a lot of people feel like if they go to see a therapist, they feel like they're going to reject God, and they're going to and even into the next point, that they're not being faithful and waiting for God to speak to them. But people, and you guys, somebody can type this one in the chat. Seeing a therapist is not cheating on God. In fact, the two work together. And so I'm going to find ways. I'm going to talk about that later and let you guys know ways how the two can work together. Thank you. Thank you, Minister Monique. And so there's also, like I said, the weakness. Some people feel like going to see a therapist is weakness, and in fact, it's not. And I'll talk to that a little bit more later in this presentation. And then there's conflicting beliefs between religion and therapy. And I will be the first to admit that there are. At least in its inception, there were. When therapy was first created, sometimes some of the theories were created by people who were non-believers. And some people feel like it's therapy or it's God in the beginning of the creation. But if you see a therapist and you get the kind of therapist who will align with you and with your needs, it's really what that therapist knows, is what that therapist, all of their experiences. And so that's why it's important in the beginning to truly pick somebody that will work for you. Don't just accept any old therapist who's given to you. Make sure you do your homework. And then do not beat me up, fellow believers, right? Do not beat me up on this one. But only God heals. That whole notion is another one that hinders people from getting therapy. God is the only healer. You're not going to hear me say that he is not. But sometimes God will work through other things and other people. And we all know those stories about being on the rooftop, and it was like a flood and somebody's on the rooftop, and then there's a boat that comes to save them. They're like, no, because they're waiting on God, right? And then a helicopter comes and they're like, no, they're waiting on God. And I think there are other things in that story to come and rescue that person. And they reject them all because they're waiting for God. But that was God who sent the boat. That was God who sent the helicopter. God is not going to come down here most of the time for us and actually do it directly for us. So he's going to work through other things and other people. And why not working through a therapist to help you heal? So even statements like, I'm too blessed to be stressed, they can hinder us, because it makes us feel like we have to be strong when we really are not feeling that strong, that we have to put on a mask and keep on a certain face, and look a certain part and keep up a certain appearance. While praying at things, and trying to pray it away is good, and prayer is powerful. You're not going to ever hear me say, don't pray. I pray. I pray for patients. I pray for myself. Prayer has gotten me through a great deal of things. But faith without works is dead. That's James 2:26. And so you can have faith and believe that God is going to help you, and then do the work to heal with a therapist, with that guidance of a therapist. So slide, we should be on the myth slide. And so another thing that hinders us is that we have all kinds of myths about therapy and what brings about mental illness. So how many of you have heard of any of those myths that are listed on the slide? If you've heard of even one of them, type 1 in the chat box. If you haven't heard of any of them, type 2. Okay, I'm seeing more ones. I haven't seen a 2 yet. Yep. Uh-oh, one of them said, somebody's got a 2. Haven't heard of any of these. Well, you got some good teaching that nobody's stigmatizing mental illness within the churches that you've been to. So I think that is great. Ray, so that is great. What's 3? Carolyn, I don't know. Carolyn Griffin, what's 3? I'm not sure. But rethinking the church as it relates to mental illness means that we have to change these myths and fight them, combat them with the truth. So the first one, or one of these things, says that mental illness is caused by sin, right? That's not true. A lot of people who have sinned and sinned a whole lot don't have a mental illness. And a lot of people who are trying their best, because none of us are sin-free, have a mental illness. So that's not true. And you certainly can believe in God, and it doesn't change your faith or your relationship with God if you have a mental illness. So that one's not true either. And then the whole one with being demon possessed is just straight up silly. It's just totally ridiculous, because we have all sinned and fall short of the glory, right? And so if that's true, not even if that's true, it is true. So are we all demon possessed? I don't think so. I'm gonna slide. And so I'm gonna hit you guys with some actual stats, right? So one of the statistics says that 1 in 4 people have a mental illness. So that's quite a bit of people. That's almost like when you're in classes and you turn to the left or you turn to the right, and one of you guys are not going to make it or something. That's a lot of people who have a mental illness. And I heard earlier from one of the doctors who presented earlier, who said that statistics has changed. It's more like 1 in 5. And that's still a lot. That's still a lot of people who are dealing with a mental health concern. And then, as you guys can see, all these other stats where there's so much percentage, like 75% of people with a family member who struggles with a mental illness or experience a mental illness, that they would like support from the church. And so many pastors, almost 50%, actually have experienced a mental illness. And then I think it's really interesting how, even though people want the resources, and some of the pastors have actually gone through some mental health concerns, that there's so little attention on mental health within the church. And so we have to rethink these statistics if we want to rethink church. We need these statistics to truly change. And they're not going to change unless we do. We're going to slide. They certainly do continue to be alarming, Dr. Williams. You would think after all of this time that some of these stats would have changed and some of these stats would be much different, but they're still continuing on. and we are chipping away at it, but we're definitely not chipping away at this issue as fast as we should. And so people are probably thinking like, yeah. Dr. J, you are a therapist. You learned those theories from those white men. And so you don't know anything about the Bible. But I grew up in church. I'm still in church, and I'm still a very active member at my church. And I know the Bible. And so here are some of the different things that the Bible says about seeking counsel and getting help. So while there's no direct quotes about getting therapy per se, it's clear when we read the scripture, you know, what all of us believers are led by. It is clear that we should have counsel, and God put all of us here to help each other. Some of that counsel will come from within the church. Some of that counsel and some of that guidance will come from outside of the church. And so I wanted to know what you guys think about the scripture. I'm going to wait and see what you guys kind of say. And I'm reading Miss, I don't know if it's Dilly. Miss Dilly, I'm reading your comment here. Okay, you said the word illness, disorder should be myth in the mental health world. Illness is the wrong word we are using. Remember, life and death is the power of the tongue. You're so right. Injury is a better term. We have sustained traumas that have caused mental injuries, causing us to break down our world we know as normal, thus causing understandable behaviors deemed as abnormal by psych professionals. And you are right. Just the word mental illness is a problem. And I don't typically use it, but to make a distinction between me using the word wellness, I've used the word illness here today too, just to make the stark difference. But I normally don't call mental illness or mental health issues mental illness, and certainly use more positive language when I'm talking about it. So I like what you presented, and I will try to make a switch to mental injuries. Thank you for sharing that. And so I'm just going to read a couple of these scripture. So it says, listen to advice and receive discipline, that you may become wise by the end of your life. Certainly, a therapist can help you with that. A stubborn fool considers his own way the right one, but a person who listens to advice is wise. And so we can get that advice inside the church, and we can get that advice outside of the church. And you definitely have to pick a therapist who is wise, who is of faith. You can't just pick any old therapist. I love the third one a lot, but since it's so long, I'm going to skip. So another one is, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. And so you can see therapy or working with the therapist as a part of your overall wellness, including what you do spiritually and with your church and with your pastor. Okay, so we're going to slide. We're on the holistic perspectives slide. And so this is something I say a lot. People tend to take mental wellness and they separate it, right? They take mental health and they separate it. And so it's like all the other things, career, social, your spiritual, all the other ones are all over here. And then we separate out mental health, but they all go together. They're one big thing, and mental health is a part of overall wellness. Just like, and don't beat me up for this one, but just like we hear the term Black Lives Matter, and then you hear somebody come back with a reply, all lives matter. Of course, all lives matter. But can all lives matter if there's any lives that don't matter? And it's been clear, you know, about how people are being treated who are Black and brown. And so if you're Black, brown, yellow, whatever, if one of us is not being treated well, then all lives don't matter. It can't matter until that one life matters. And so once that one life matters, then it joins in. Wellness is the same way. Wellness is the exact same way. We have to take mental health and join it with all the other facets of wellness. I hope I made the point there. So here's a question. Carolyn Griffin said, why is mental illness not to be spoken of as an illness while all other illnesses are? This seems to add to the stigma. Sometimes people, it becomes kind of a barrier for people. And I was going to save all of these questions to last, but these are some good questions that you guys are coming in with and some good comments. But sometimes that can be a hindrance, the language that we use in the mental health world. And so we like to reframe it in a way that people can receive it. It's kind of like if you're at a church and you have several pastors, right? And so whenever Pastor A preaches, you love it and you can hear the message. Pastor B may say the exact same thing, but it just doesn't resonate with you. And so having different words to describe the same thing helps us to pull more people in. So I hope that makes sense. Somebody may not mind it being mental illness. And there are actually a lot of people who like to know the terms for whatever it is that is ailing them. And so once they label it, it makes more sense to them. And then they feel much better because they didn't know what was wrong all that other time. But for some people, they don't like it. I have a kid who has anxiety, but she likes to call it drama. And so what do we call it? Drama. As long as she knows that she is working on her drama, I don't care what we call it, as long as she gets better. So I hope that answers your question. So we're going to slide. And so God and therapy do go hand in hand. They go together. How many of us feel that God and therapy can coexist? If you think that the two can coexist, type 1 in the chat box. If you don't, type 2, and that's okay. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of ones. I know you do, Dr. Williams. Okay, I saw all ones. And somebody, I know they're still coming in, somebody might post the 2. So I am glad to be in a group that understands that the 2 can coexist. The 2 are not mutually exclusive. Just like I was talking about wellness, like all the other wellness and then mental wellness here, they all go, everything goes together because we are holistic people. We're not separate. We're not, I'm this here, I'm that there. We're all one whole person. And so everything goes together, including our relationship with God and anything that you would do with your therapist. So I'll just have a quick story right here. I had a patient who, he was younger at the time. He was like in his young 20s, 22 or something like that. He was in college. So he was college age and he was getting close to being done with college. So probably closer to 22. African-American male. I do neurotherapy. And so we had done an assessment of his brain abilities. And once we went over the results, he was adamant against doing neurotherapy. Adamant. Excuse me. And he later called back and he came. Excuse me. He later called back and he came in and he did the neurotherapy. So neurotherapy is a brain-based treatment where you're rewiring the brain to help stabilize any dysregulation. So if you have mood disorders, if you have anxiety, this will help stabilize those symptoms from a brain-based perspective. I'm not going to say what this young man's condition was, but he had one of the ones that were more chronic and more severe. And with medication and neurotherapy, he did way better. And a big part of that was the fact that he used spiritual music, so gospel music, and he used positive messages as his feedback for his neurotherapy. So he combined them together, and he did so much better. I actually had the pleasure of running into him in the hallway where I work, where he was meeting with another clinician for something totally unrelated. And he told me that he had graduated, he was going on to college again, but this young man, when he came to me, was struggling in college. He was failing all his classes, and he wasn't really sure of the future. And with his combination of his faith in God, his spiritual practices, and yes, seeing a therapist for neurotherapy, he was able to get over that hump. And so the two do go together. I've seen it firsthand in my own practice. So we have to stop thinking that these two are separated or that they are at odds with each other. And you can have God and a therapist too. That's just the bottom line. You can have both. And the people that I see who have both, who are spiritual beings, they're believers, they go to church and they read the word, they usually do far, far better in therapy than the other people who don't. So you already have a leg up if you go to therapy, because you're practicing what you've been raised to practice, and then you just learn some other things that complement what you learned along the way when you were younger. Having a therapist or going to therapy does not make you a bad believer. In fact, and I'm going to talk about that coming up, it makes you much stronger, and it can connect you closer to God. And especially now that we are all sheltering in place, I know some of us are going out more, but this is not what we are used to, right? This is so different from our norm, and I don't know that we will ever return back to what we had before. So what we want is to make sure that if things are getting rough while we're on the inside, so this is what I'm trying to say. If it's getting rough while we're here, we're going to have to make sure that we are reaching out for the resources that we need. Because this whole thing and the next pandemic is projected to be a mental health pandemic, because none of us were equipped to do this. None of us were equipped to be prepared for something like this. I never thought I'd be in a pandemic in my lifetime. I mean, it seems like something that we just read in the school books, and now we're all in one currently. So what are your thoughts about this? I'd love to hear some of your comments in the comment box. My therapist recently retired, so I'm having to transition. Oh, yes. Did she recommend somebody for you, Miss Monica? Sometimes when you leave a therapist, or if a therapist is leaving a practice or retiring altogether, they will share some resources with you for other people that they feel are kind of similar to them, and to help make that transition smoother. And so Christopher Oliver said, will you share the differences / similarities between a licensed professional counselor and a pastoral counselor therapist? Whew. Okay, that's not really the scope of this talk, but I will try to answer it. This is something that I talk about in depth in my upcoming book. I talk about all the different types of therapists and all those alphabet soups that we see all the time, that nobody knows what they mean behind people's names. But generally, a therapist is trained to do more emotional health and behavioral health, and not necessarily will focus on the spiritual aspects. A lot of pastoral counselors will either provide spiritual guidance to their members, or some pastoral counselors provide spiritual guidance or counseling to other pastors. So I hope that answers your question. Dr. Williams, I know you know your answers to your questions. What are your thoughts about using scripture to guide therapeutic sessions and interventions? Yes, I've done it a lot. In fact, I have a patient, another black male patient who's in his 30s, who he's very spiritual. His church life, his connection to God, his connection to his church, and his involvement in church is a big part of his life. And so sometimes when he is kind of having some difficulties in some areas, I pull up different scripture. I remind him of different um, principles from the Bible. Like, we will pull out the Bible, we will talk about different scripture, and that helps him to get back on track. And so sometimes, I don't know, he doesn't feel as comfortable going to people in his church. And so that's another time when it's nice, if you're truly involved in the church and everybody knows you and you don't want your business to be spread, working with somebody outside of the church, but who is also of a faith believer, could be a great option, so that you can work on what's needed and whatever goals that you you want to work on, and whatever you're presenting with. I hope that answers your question, Dr. Williams. I'm going to read a couple more comments. Dr. Anita Arnita says, at my church, having a therapist is part of our conversation. Wow, that is amazing. That is not the norm wide. I wonder if your church is much bigger. The trust factor. Yep, that trust factor is huge, Reverend Prince. People don't feel like they can truly trust what they say will stay between who they're talking to when they're going to people at the church, or people over, like I said earlier, they're overusing the clergy or the pastor and trying to get help, because a lot of times pastors, they don't charge anything for it, and they're just trying to get as much help as they can. And that's another barrier, financial. I couldn't list all the barriers here today in this 45-minute segment. So I'm going to move it on. We're going to slide to the next slide. And we want to start to talk about some of the benefits. So the benefits of therapy are many. I list so many of them in this upcoming book, and I am happy to share when this book will come out with anybody. If you want to leave your email address, I will put you on the list, and you can know when this book comes out. But I'm just going to highlight a couple. A therapist can help you with, improve your self-esteem. A therapist can help you to improve relational difficulties. A therapist will honor, or should, if you have a therapist that's not honoring what you want and what you need for your life, because after all, you're the best one for it, the therapist is just going to help guide you and help you build some insight on what's going on. The therapist can help you with that. But there are some things that are more specific to believers as far as the benefits of therapy. So like I said earlier, most of the people, heck, all of the people I've worked with who have a foundation with God, a relationship with God, or a foundation in church, and are more spiritually connected, they do much better with therapy. And they go quicker, because we can use all those different facets of them than people who don't, because I've actually worked with some people who identify as atheists. And it just seems like they're in therapy forever and ever because they don't have that foundation. And so when you, so for believers, if you believe in God, you're going to get different benefits that are unique to you because you are a believer. And so one of those is that mind, body, spirit connection. So of course, like if we go back to that wellness wheel that I had some slides back, mind, body, and spirit all are one. And if you aren't even a believer, you're missing that component. So that's a lot of times that's that missing piece. And then a therapist, a nice benefit for believers that you can get is that it's going to help you to know yourself better, which will strengthen your faith. So the more you know you, the better your faith becomes. And then another benefit is that therapy can be another way of becoming closer to God, because as we know who we are, then we are better able to be connected with God. It's just like when you know yourself better. I don't know if this is anybody's life, but when think about like when you were a teenager, you're still learning, you're still trying to figure out who you are. And then think about some of those crazy relationships that you had with people, and you're bumping heads with people because you don't fully know who you are. And so as we get older and we're still figuring some things out with ourselves, or maybe we get a little bit off of track of who we are and we need to be reconnected with who we are. Once you strengthen that, you strengthen your relationships with other people, things go a lot smoother. And that's the same thing in your relationship with God. You won't be fighting with God as much. You won't be avoiding like going to church. You won't be dragging on, during your daily devotion or your Bible study. You'll be feeling more like a whole person, and then you'll be more connected and closer with God. So there's so many benefits to therapy, and these are just some of them that I am highlighting for people who are believers. And so let's see, God created you. He also created me. He created the therapist. He creates everything, and he created everybody. And so just like you're going to trust God to work through a surgeon if you were in an accident and you broke bones or something is wrong with you, you want to bring that same trust to trusting God to work through that therapist to help you heal emotionally, or to help you change behaviorally, or to help you rewire something in your brain or your mindset. We just have to trust God to do that. We're going to slide. And so how do we bridge the gap? I'm not one of these people who are going to give you all this stuff and then we're just going to have a beautiful conversation without telling you some ways that I think we can fix the problem. And so that's what this is. We want to bridge the gap, and the way that we bridge the gap is to reset the mind, and we have to reset our behaviors around how we look at mental health. Which means that to rethink church, then it's just totally vital to change our mindset and to change our behaviors. So how do we do this, right? We want to look at mental health, and we want to just change our perspective or our mindset on mental health. And some of the ways that we do that is by changing our perspective. And like I mentioned earlier, you want to talk about mental health like you would talk about anything else when you're at that water cooler at work, or when you're having conversations with your friends and your family members. Just like you might talk about an upcoming surgery that you might have, or what you watched when you binge watched on Netflix, something like that. You want to just have this be a natural part of conversation and talking about if you're not feeling your best, or and what you do when you don't feel your best. We have to make this just a normal part of conversation in order to change the perspective, and more importantly, to decrease the stigma around it. We also want to start to change our view on therapy and see it as an additive or complementary to our spirituality, and not as something that is separate or against our spirituality. Then you want to alter your view of how God works. So what I mean by that is that, and I kind of said this one before, but God works through everything and everybody. You think about, my pastor has a really good story of when he was in seminary school, and he needed to get to class and he didn't have any money, zero. But along the way, he kept getting transfers, and I don't know if he got the money he needed for something and this and that. God worked it out so that he got from point A to point B, and somebody gave him everything that he needed. He trusted God when he walked out that door, that God would get him there. He knew he had no money and no other means to get there. He went there on faith, and he got to school and he got back home, all with no money. And so sometimes we will walk up and somebody might give us like $5 out of nowhere, just out of nowhere. We needed the $5. We didn't have no money. We couldn't eat lunch or whatever. Somebody gives us $5 and we trusted God to take care of us that day. You have to do the same thing with the therapist. Trust God to work through the therapist. Pray along the way and ask God to send you to that therapist that is for you. The one that he has sent to work with your unique needs. And then you trust that process. We want to also look at how we change therapy. We also want to look at, we want to think about getting a faith-based therapist. So when we think about a faith-based therapist, we think about Christian counselors. But I don't know if Dr. Williams, she's here, if she's a Christian counselor. I know that she's a licensed social worker. If she's actually certified in Christian counseling, and then I know Carolyn McPherson Atkins is a biblical counselor, right? And I'm a clinical counselor. But clearly, I am a woman of faith. Clearly, I use a lot of techniques faith-based in my work. And so you can go to a Christian counselor. But if you can't find a Christian counselor who you can afford in your network, or just can't find one, period, go to somebody who is faith-based. So faith-based can be an actual certified Christian counselor or somebody trained in it, or somebody who has been trained in spiritual practices with mental health, and they will bring that to the sessions, to the therapy sessions. And so there's a wide variety of your options and what you can do to get what you need. And then something else to bridge the gap that I want, that I see, is that people should, the church, clergy, and pastors, I would like to see more education and training around mental health, what it is, what it looks like, and when it's beyond the church's scope, and they need to refer to somebody like me, or like a Dr. Williams, or like Miss Carolyn McPherson Atkins, who does biblical counseling. And so you want to refer to somebody else so that we can free our leaders up, our church leaders up, so they can do a lot of the other work in the church, because they have so many roles that they have to play. And churches can also have support groups and offer additional resources, and even something as simple as compiling a list of different people who provide therapy services in the area, so that your congregants or your church members can have a list whenever they need it. Or if pastors are working with members and they see that it is beyond their scope, then they can refer out to somebody else who will be who's more clinically trained for those more chronic and acute concerns. Okay, so we're going to slide. And as we're sliding, I wanted to know which of those that you just saw do you feel like you or your church can implement right now? So maybe we should slide back. I'm sorry, Reverend Womack. Maybe we should slide back so people can be reminded. So which one of those, and I just want you to put it in the chat box, which one of those can be something that you feel like you can do now, or that your church can do now? Just pick one, because this thing does not have to be as hard as we make it. To bridge the gap between God and therapy, all we need to do is start taking small steps. Okay, Mr. Bonner, I hope I'm saying your name right, says education and training around mental health. That's a great one. Let's see if we get a couple more. And I feel like I flew past one of these slides here, but I'm going to say with God and therapy, while you guys type, It takes faith to reach out for help. It takes a lot of strength to say, I need help, and to actually go get the help. It takes faith to remain committed to therapy, because a lot of people have a first session, but not everybody sticks with it and get to that healing. And it takes faith to do the work to heal. So a lot of people think they're going to go into therapy, they're just going to talk, but no, sometimes you got to do work between sessions. And that work is not always going to be easy. And it takes faith to do that hard work. And it also takes faith to continue to trust God in adversity, and when you have difficulty, rather than to give up on God. So I just didn't want to gloss over that one too much. So some of the other ones was a church support group. Yep, church support group. Minister Monique and Miss Monica, Dr. Fowler, I can say that easier. Expand Council staff. We currently, yep, because you're already putting a lot in place, so that's great. And after view of how God works, alter the view of how God works. Yeah, that's a good one, Miss Griffin. And changing church narratives on mental health. Yes, I love it. Okay, and so now we should be on the slide that sees a picture. So I have a gift for you guys. It's actually an excerpt from my book, but it's a good therapy, what is it called? Guide to Good Therapy quick sheet. So it lists all the different things, like very quickly, a lot of the components that you need when you reach out for help, for mental health services. And then I help people change their brains so that they can live their most optimal life. And if you or a loved one is looking for some support or some guidance to help with your emotional, your mental, or behavioral health, I am here to help. And you can check out my website at drkatherinejackson.com and reach out. I do a wealth of different things. I also am available to speak at things to help people bring down some of these stigmas and some of the myths that surround mental health. And so if you are in need of that, I'm happy to do that. And so I think we're pretty much starting to run out of time, but does anybody have any questions? And we can slide to the last slide while I read the comments. And it's the very last slide with my picture there. And we can, normalizing mental health as part of health. Thank you guys for sharing your email addresses, and I will put everybody on the list for to hear about the book. And if you would like that gift, please leave your email in the chat box. I'm going to collect them all before I leave, and I will send everybody, even the ones who said they wanted the book, I will send everybody the free gift with the guide to good therapy, the little quick sheet. I will send that to everybody. Yeah, you can send it in the chat. Yeah, you can even send it in the chat directly to me. You can send your email address, and I will send that quick sheet to everybody. So thank you guys so much for allowing me to share. Thank you, Reverend Womack, and thank you, Reverend Quinta. I hope I'm saying her name right. And for everybody who was involved in this, I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share here. And I was a fan throughout the whole day, and then I get to to present at the end, and because this is such an important topic, and I really appreciate you guys working to help bring down some of the barriers around mental health and the church. All right, guys, that's all I got, and because I don't see any questions. Thank you so much, Ms. Griffin. I'm glad that I was able to share something that was helpful. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Love you, Queen. Let's see. Thank you, guys. And I think this is the end of the whole session. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Oliver. And so if anybody has any questions with mental health, one of the things that I love doing when people slide into the DMs, not for any mess, but if you ask me a mental health question, I will try to get you connected to the resources or answer your question. Yes, Dr. Williams, we got to get together. Thank you, Minister Monique. Thanks for coming, always being so supportive. I really appreciate you. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Miss P, but thank you. Thank you, Mrs. McPherson-Atkins. Okay, you guys don't have to stay. I have to stay and collect your emails. So I'm going to be here for a little bit. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer.
Hey, you don't have to collect the emails. We're going to send you a copy of the chat.
Woo, that's even better.
So you guys are good. You all enjoy.
I'm about to go through and just like,
we have to do that. We have technology.
Nice. So is this the end of everything? We don't have like a closing ceremony?
No, I'm tired. I'm just joking.
Closing ceremony is a nap for all of us.
Yes, everybody go on woosah. Take all the information you learned and go and sit and rest in it. Right. So thank you guys so much. I'll see you all over on
Thank
Facebook.
You guys.
Y'all follow the
you'll be getting your sheet, and I'll put you on the mailing list for the book because she's going to send me the information.
Yep.
You guys take care.